the talent pool that they're getting in Liga MX, I think, is lower, has dropped off, and now MLS is getting stronger. So it doesn't feel like it used to feel when you watch Liga MX and go, oh, there's some top talent there. You look at some of the players, you say, oh, they'd be starring in MLS. Now it's not so much. Now you have MLS teams buying some of the best players in Liga MX. That never happened before.
We're getting to a point now with our national team, which is a good thing, where you can be playing in the Champions League, you can be playing at a big club, but that doesn't necessarily warrant or give you a guarantee that you're going to be called in with the national team. And I think that's a healthy sign for our national team overall. But let's talk about current form, because we have a player. I'm going to leave his name out of this for right now. I'm just going to say that he is considered the best player in his respective league right now. He's got 5 goals and 4 assists in his league. Mm-hmm. He's tied on 9 goal contributions. Okay. And he's with 2 other players early on in this league. So now I'm kind of giving away some clues, but he's had 2 fewer games to do that. If we had a player playing in a league that was crushing it right there, in the past, that would be an automatic call-in. But now, maybe because the league isn't as strong as some of the other ones, or that's how it's considered. But we've seen players make World Cup rosters from this league because they went on a tear and scored a whole bunch of goals. Okay, so the player that I'm talking about currently is Alejandro Zendejas for Club America, and the player that I was seeing who scored a whole bunch of goals and made a World Cup roster was Herculez Gomez. Now, before we get into the strength of Liga MX from when Herc was playing to now, which I think is a conversation to have, do you think, given current form for Alejandro Zendejas, that he deserves to get called in? Because if I was him, like, what else do I have to do to get a call in? Like, I can hang with the national team. He hasn't made the most of his opportunities, so we can say that. But what else does a player have to do other than being on absolute fire? Does he have to do it for a goddamn year before he gets called in? I mean, they already know what he's about.
Yeah. I think given his production and what he's been able to do with Club America over the past year, he absolutely deserves, especially recently, right? We're talking about, does he deserve to get called into this camp? Absolutely. The thing is with Zendejas, and this happens to players, is you might perform at the club level to warrant a call-up, but that doesn't mean it translates. He has the quality, but doesn't mean it translates to the team and the fit and the tactical, whatever the tactical advantages that the U.S. men's national team have over most opponents in the attacking third. For whatever reason, it just hasn't worked with him. That's not to say that it can't work with him, right? So does he warrant a call-up? Yes.
Well, okay, yes, he does warrant a call-up. I agree with you. And I think it'd be a crazy precedent in some ways that if somebody was that on fire, you're like, nah, we're good. we're gonna go with somebody that doesn't play much for their team in Europe. It'd just be like, what? So he did. Zendejas did come on. Remember when there was a friendly in Mexico, and Pochettino's first away game, we lost that one. But I thought he was one of the bright spots. He came off the bench. And Vasquez falls into this too. Brandon Vasquez came off the bench as well, and all of a sudden you saw a little bit something. And Zendejas was the only one that was like up for the fight, right? He was getting people's faces. He was making tackles. Like, sweet. That's what I want to see when not only when you come off the bench, and anytime you play Mexico in particular.
Yeah. I mean, we know that Pochettino will be impressed with that. Just the same way that you look at certain players, you go, oh, all right, this guy. He's definitely going to get another look because the way Pochettino talks about him. And I think it's going to be difficult for him to play, especially if he's
even if he gets
competing with Yunus Musa or Timothy Weah. But because he offers you something different and he's performing at the club level, I think he's gonna get called in. Remember how Pochettino talked about Diego Luna and having that, busted nose and still willing to go and fight and make a difference.
Right.
That's something that you talk about first impressions, that sticks with a coach.
Yeah.
So that's another player that I think could potentially get called in just because of that, because he showed, I'll do whatever it takes to fight for my country. And that's the kind of guys Pochettino wants in the locker room. Yeah. So in all, I guess after all that, I'll say Zendejas definitely deserves to get called in. he just hasn't showed well yet with the U.S. men's national team, and that doesn't mean he can't in the future, but he hasn't yet.
There was a good comment that flashed on the screen, and I can't remember who it was. So producer Des
Yeah.
can pop it back up when I reference it. And it was with regard to Zendejas has earned one more chance. And I like that thought because
couldn't agree more.
That feels very true. Like, okay, you're doing it for your club. You're probably playing as well as you ever have in his career, right? We're catching you at your peak. We're going to bring you back in one more time, because if he can't maximize that opportunity one more time, then you're like, okay, we can turn the page on Zendejas. But this could be it. And listen, we've played enough, Chuck, that whether it was us in our own careers or with other players, you kind of knew that this was going to be their last chance in a particular camp. It was kind of a now or never. Some players rose to that challenge and some did not, right? And that even extended to players that had a long career with the national team. Like, man, if they're not sharp here, this could be it, you know? We've seen
I think there's important context here too, right? I look at myself. It took me 3-4 camps, probably 4,
to get comfortable.
And I'd say I didn't perform well in most of those appearances until it wasn't until the Nations League, the Confederations Cup, that it clicked for me. But my club form kept getting me call-ups, and Bob probably saw, okay, there's something different about me. I'm going to keep giving him call-ups, and hopefully he catches up. I don't know how many call-ups I had left if I didn't perform, right? But I was young. Zendejas is 27. See, there's a difference between a young player coming in and you're giving him opportunities, and he's performing at the club level, probably earning another move to a bigger league, bigger club in Europe, versus someone who's 27 playing in Liga MX, and you're giving him opportunities and it hasn't worked out yet, right? So the leash is much shorter, is what I guess what you're saying as well.
All right, so we did a poll, and 79% are in favor of having Zendejas get called in. All right, we like that. Good positivity in our polls and in the chat right now.
I like this chat.
All right, so let's go to what I had mentioned before. I'm going to call back a theme and question that I wanted to talk about as it pertained to Herculez Gomez 15 years ago versus Zendejas in Liga MX right now. Before we started the show, you and I were discussing, Chuck, I'm going to throw you under the bus a little bit here, that maybe Liga MX wasn't as strong as it used to be. And I think there are a lot of signs and markers that it isn't. Now, always when I think about Liga MX, I think about how it compares to MLS. And MLS is growing, and Liga MX feels like they've turned into more a couple teams that are the superpowers of the league, and everything else is maybe feels like there's more of a drop-off, right? The kind of haves and have-nots. Whereas before, I remember if we go down to play like a Toluca or Necaxa, or like that was a good game, and they had some good players. And not to say that they don't still have that, but it doesn't feel like they carry the same weight as they once was. I'm using those two clubs as examples, but I think they're not necessarily isolated to those two. And when I think about maybe the fear factor, if a Monterrey or a Club America or Tigres now rolls into town, if you're playing in Leagues Cup or Concacaf Champions Cup, it's not as, I don't know, they don't seem to have the same gravitas as they once had. And this is a shift over the last couple of years. Are you feeling the same way? Do you see that Liga MX is nowhere near as strong? And I think that's impacting their national team as well.
Well, I think there's two things here. MLS is getting stronger, and Liga MX is getting weaker in the process, because the players that are going to MLS used to be going to Liga MX, especially the South American talent. Whether it's the young talent coming in and they don't get their move to Europe, so they go to Liga MX, they make more money, and then they make the move, or it's the more established players in South America that are coming to MLS instead of going to Liga MX. So the talent pool that they're getting in Liga MX, I think, is lower, has dropped off, and now MLS is getting stronger. So it doesn't feel like it used to feel when you watch Liga MX and go, oh, there's some top talent there. You know, you look at some of the players, you say, oh, they'd be starring in MLS. Now it's not so much. Now you have MLS teams buying some of the best players in Liga MX. That never happened before. So I that's what when I look at the stats for Liga MX. Henry Martin, who we know very well from the L3 from the Mexican national team. Alexis Vega, we know very well from the Mexican national team. Henry Martin has nine assists as well as Zendejas. They both have 9 assists. And then Alexis Vega has 8 assists. Now, what's crazy is Henry Martin and Zendejas, both on the same club, have 9 assists. Alvaro Vidalgo and Brian Rodriguez, who was also an MLS player at LAFC, they also have 8 assists. So you have 4 players on your club with 8 assists or more. That doesn't happen. That doesn't even seem real to me.
Right.
You know? So I don't want that to – I'm not trying to take away what Zendejas has done because he's performed well.
It sounds like it.
It's one of the biggest clubs. No, the pressure doesn't change for one of the biggest clubs in North America. So he absolutely has deserved to get a call in. And I would say the same with Ledesma. When I look at what he's done, his body of work at PSV, how the hell is he not on at least the preliminary roster?
Yeah. Ledesma's
Richie Ledesma has absolutely deserved to deserve a look, right?
Well, Javier Aguirre, the coach for Mexico, said this. I spoke with Richard Ledesma. He will have to make his decision. He has a possibility of being Mexican. I didn't put him on the list of 60 because at the moment I wasn't so clear about him. And obviously from a Mauricio Pochettino perspective, what he said in the past, I don't need to convince a player to want to play for the U.S. So Richie Ledesma is not on either 60-man preliminary roster for either the U.S. or Mexico. So that the guy just has to make a decision. So here's what I'll say very, very quickly about Liga MX. They despite the drop-off, which feels pretty real, they still dominate CONCACAF Champions Cup. A Mexican team, now this has been going on since, I believe, 1962, some form of the CONCACAF Champions Cup, okay? Whether it was called that or the CONCACAF Champions League or whatever it was, okay? Mm-hmm. Mexican teams have won it, Chuck, 39 times and have been runners-up 20 times.
They've absolutely dominated it.
So since 1962, Mexico have won it 39 times and been runners. 59 times they've had a team in the final, either winning it or just being in the final. The U.S. have had three winners since 1962, 5 runners up, so only 8. 8 versus 59. Yeah, so
it's history.
And Canada has no titles and has 2 runners up. So from a North American perspective, it's a
Montreal and TFC, are those the 2 runner up? Montreal and TFC?
Yes, Montreal in 2014, 2015, and Toronto 2018. DC United, 1998, LA Galaxy won it in 2000, and then the Sounders won it in 2022. So
the Sounders changed everything.
Well,
Club World Cup.
Well, they're in the Club World Cup. Yeah, that makes a big difference. But there still needs to be a consistency, I think, from an MLS perspective before that perception really starts to shift harder to what MLS and Canada and US are doing. You're still here? Yes! I absolutely love that. Listen, while I have your attention, if you want more average to good soccer content, this is the channel for you. Go check out our other videos. Go check out our playlists. And if you're really liking what you're seeing, I don't know how you couldn't, hit like, hit subscribe, of course, and then turn on your notifications so that you do not miss anything that we drop or when we go live. We'd really appreciate that. We'll see you next time.